I always woke up before everyone else. Not out of obligation, habit maybe, but mostly love. The kitchen was quiet in the early hours. Just me, the hum of the fridge, and the scent of yesterday's spices still lingering in the air. I'd tie my apron like armor, crack a dozen eggs with one hand, and let the rhythm of cooking settle my heart. I wasn't just feeding children. I was holding space for them, shaping little moments of care with every tray I served. Most days, no one looked me in the eye. The students rushed past, earbuds in, too busy for thank yous. But that didn't bother me much. I knew what I was doing mattered, even if it didn't make a sound. I'd watch the quiet ones, kids who sat alone, smile at a warm roll or a surprise cookie. That was enough. That was my paycheck in a way no direct deposit could match. At home, though, it started to feel different. My kids, my own, had begun shrinking when I mentioned work. "You're not really going to wear that apron here, are you?" my daughter once whispered as we walked into the grocery store. My son changed the subject when his friends asked what I did. They used to beam when I brought leftovers home. Now it's like the food embarrassed them, like I embarrassed them. I told myself it was just a phase. Teenagers. Image conscious, insecure. But deep down, something in me tightened. They were pulling away from who I really was. Not the cook, not the cafeteria lady. Me, the mother who stayed late to make birthday cupcakes from scratch. The woman who held this house together with beans, rice, and heart. I swallowed the hurt, wiped my hands on my apron, and pretended not to notice. It happened during the spring carnival at school. I was helping behind the scenes, hair tied back, apron on like always. One of the teachers waved me over to refill the lemonade, and I smiled, happy just to be part of it. That's when I heard it, clear as glass breaking. My daughter, laughing with her friends, rolled her eyes and said, "Ugh, that's just my mom. She's the lunch lady." She said it like a punchline, and they all laughed. I froze, just for a second. But that second felt like years. My hands didn't know what to do, still gripping the lemonade pitcher, still pretending I was invisible. I wanted to say something, maybe just her name, gently, like a reminder, but the words stuck in my throat. I looked at her face. She wasn't angry. She wasn't trying to be cruel. She was just embarrassed by me. Later that night, I stood at the sink longer than usual. The dishes were done, but I stayed anyway, hands resting in the warm water. I kept replaying it, wondering if I'd misheard, if I was being too sensitive. But I hadn't, and I wasn't. I could still feel the sting in my chest, like someone had reached in and pressed a bruise that hadn't fully healed. And worse, I didn't say a word. I let it sit there, between us. They say shame is a quiet thing. It doesn't scream. It just slips in when you're alone, sits beside you while you scrub the same plate twice and whispers, "You're not enough." But I knew that voice. I'd fought it before. And deep inside, another voice, mine, answered back. Not yet out loud, but fierce and steady. They think I serve food. One day I'll serve them the truth. The next morning I packed their lunches like always. Sandwiches cut just the way they liked, little notes tucked inside, though I knew they'd probably toss them. I didn't say anything about what happened. Not at breakfast. Not in the car. I smiled, asked about homework, reminded them to wear their jackets. I played my part like nothing had cracked. But something had. Something important. And once it cracked, it started shifting. I showed up to work that day with my head high. Not out of pride, but because I refused to let my hurt be the thing that defined me. I stirred the soup with more purpose, cleaned the counters like they were sacred ground. I started paying attention to the recipes, really paying attention. Something inside me clicked. If I could make this cafeteria food taste like home, what else could I do? The world had gotten so loud with its labels. Lunch lady. Just a cook. Not enough. But I knew better. I had calluses on my hands from building more than meals. I had stories in my bones and wisdom that couldn't be Googled. They thought they were laughing at a title, but they were blind to the woman carrying it, and I let them, until now. Because here's the truth. I may wear an apron, but I'm no one's background character. Not anymore. Something was waking up in me, slow but strong. I didn't know the shape of it yet, but I could feel it rising, steady as a rising loaf of bread. Let them laugh. Let them look down. I was about to make something that would change the way they saw me, whether they liked it or not. I didn't make an announcement. There was no dramatic vow, no slammed doors or fiery speeches, just small shifts, subtle but sure. At night, after the house went quiet, I'd sit at the kitchen table with a chipped notebook and a second cup of tea. I started writing things down. Recipes? Yes, but also questions. Why certain meals comforted people? What nutrients did for the brain? How flavors carried memory. I found free courses online, hidden gems tucked between parenting tips and grocery store coupons. I'd watch videos while folding laundry, pause lectures to stir the stew. I felt like I was building something in the shadows, brick by invisible brick. No one asked what I was up to. My kids barely looked up from their phones. And honestly, that was fine. It gave me space to move without expectation. I tested new recipes on the weekends, calling them leftover experiments. I studied ingredients like they were stories, learning their textures, their secrets. I began seeing food as something more than fuel. It was a way to reclaim power. Not just for me, but for anyone who'd ever been told their work was small. I wasn't just cooking anymore. I was crafting something that felt like a future. Still, no one noticed. My daughter walked past my simmering pots without a glance. My son groaned when I replaced the frozen pizza with roasted squash and lentils. That used to hurt. But now I saw it differently. They were chasing noise, likes, image, flash. I was building quiet. And quiet, when tended with care, has a way of becoming unshakable. I started waking up earlier. Not out of duty this time, but anticipation. There was something thrilling about it. The stillness of the house, the empty page in my notebook, the promise of creation. My fingers would be covered in flour before sunrise, and I didn't mind. I was experimenting, failing, trying again. Testing dishes with cumin, citrus, heat. Not everything worked, but when it did, when a flavor hit just right, it felt like a small victory. Some nights I'd imagine what it could become. A blog, a little service for families too busy to cook but hungry for something real. The ideas felt wild at first, like dreams I wasn't allowed to dream. But then I'd remember the way people's shoulders dropped after a good meal, the way food softened even the hardest days. And I'd think, maybe there's something here, something mine. Meanwhile, my kids were chasing air, trends that lasted a week, friends who ghosted the minute someone cooler showed up. They posted photos of avocado toast from cafes I couldn't afford, not realizing their mother was reinventing the dish in her own kitchen for half the price. They didn't see me. But I was starting to see myself in a way I hadn't in years, and that vision, it fueled me more than anything they could give. There was power in being underestimated, in working where no one looked. They thought silence meant nothing was happening. But silence is where roots grow, and mine were stretching deep, quiet, steady, ready to hold the weight of something bigger. Let them chase the wind. I was learning how to build a foundation. I launched the site on a Sunday night. No big reveal, no social media splash, just a quiet click. I'd spent weeks learning how to build it, tutorials, late-night frustration, moments of pure joy when a page finally loaded the way I wanted. I called it The Hearth, because that's what I wanted people to feel. Warmth, safety, something steady in a restless world. I didn't even put my name on it. I wasn't doing it for credit. I was doing it for purpose. At first, it was just a few downloads, some busy moms, a retired teacher who left a kind comment, a nurse from Oregon who said one of my soups reminded her of home. That was enough to keep going. I refined the meal plans, learned to price without guilt. I was slow, careful, intentional. It felt good to be building something with my own hands, something that fed more than hunger. At dinner, I'd listen to my kids talk about their days, parties, who was wearing what, who got unfollowed by whom. Their world spun fast, always louder, always on display. And yet they came home empty, restless. I could see it in their eyes. They were searching for something solid, but they didn't know what it looked like. Not yet. I didn't say a word. I just kept stirring, kept working. Let them keep climbing, I thought, watching them chase clouds with no shape. One day, the air will thin. One day, the ladders they trusted will wobble. And when that happens, when they fall back to earth, they'll need something real to land on. I was already building it, piece by piece, recipe by recipe. And they didn't even know it yet. I didn't even realize it was happening at first. The blog traffic picked up slowly, one post getting shared on a small Facebook group, then another picked up by a parenting newsletter. A few kind strangers started tagging the hearth in their food photos. Then one morning, I woke up to an email from someone named Liv. She had over 500,000 followers. "I made your lentil stew," she wrote. "It tasted like my grandmother's kitchen. Who are you?" That message lit something in me. I didn't reply right away. I stared at the screen for a long time, thinking about what it meant. My words, my food, had found their way into someone else's story. And not just anyone, someone with reach, someone who could turn a whisper into a roar. I took a deep breath, tucked the thrill into my chest, and typed back carefully, "Just someone who's been feeding people her whole life." Within a week, the blog exploded. The traffic doubled, then tripled. A local entrepreneur asked to feature my recipes in his new wellness cafe. A school district emailed, asking if I could help redesign their nutrition program. One person wanted to invest in meal kits. I said yes to some, no to others, but I kept my name off everything. I wanted the work to speak first, not the face they'd dismissed as just a lunch lady. I built the brand with intention, clean lines, muted colors, dishes plated like they belonged in glossy magazines. The logo was a flame tucked inside a spoon. No hint of me, just the feeling, the warmth, the weight. And the name began to spread. My kids started hearing about it at school. Their friends raved about a new delivery meal that didn't taste healthy, but was. And I watched them nod, curious, completely unaware. It was surreal, watching the brand bloom in the same hallways where I'd once served trays of spaghetti in silence. My daughter came home raving about a new pop-up cafe on campus, her eyes bright for the first time in weeks. "It's like comfort food, but elevated," she said. "I applied for a student rep position. They're offering discounts and internships." I smiled and nodded, careful not to give myself away. I'd written the menu she couldn't stop talking about. A week later, my son mentioned that a few of his friends were trying to land part-time work with that food startup. One even said it might look good on college applications. He pulled out his phone and showed me the site. My site, but he didn't recognize it. They didn't recognize me, and I didn't correct them. Not yet. I let them live in the mystery a little longer. Let them chase what I'd built with the same hunger they once used to dismiss me. When my son got the interview email, he looked proud for the first time in months. "They said I had good energy," he told me. "They liked my ideas." I nodded, biting the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. Of course they did. I knew him. His rhythms, his strengths, the way he lit up when someone believed in him. I'd spent years trying to get that light to stay on. And now, through a carefully written hiring message, I was finally reaching him. I hired them both, anonymously. I assigned different teams, different tasks, no mention of our shared last name. They were just names on the roster. To everyone else, I was the founder. To them, I was just the woman who trained the staff, sent the daily recipe notes, signed every email with a single initial. And still, they never guessed. Not yet. But it was coming. And when it did, I knew it would land like thunder. They worked hard, surprisingly hard. My daughter took on menu logistics, coordinating deliveries and responding to customer feedback with a professionalism I'd never seen from her at home. My son was assigned to content development, helping create cooking reels and writing short captions under my direction. They didn't know the hands shaping their assignments were the same hands that once packed their lunches with quiet care and little love notes they never read. I watched them grow from a distance. Not as a mother, but as a leader. I held them to the same standards as everyone else, maybe stricter. I didn't cut corners. I didn't soften my tone. If anything, I was more demanding, because I knew what they were capable of. And deep down, I needed them to feel what it was like to earn their place, Not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted them to remember what respect looks like. Sometimes, I'd hear them talking to each other during breaks, wondering about the founder. "Who do you think it is?" one of them asked. "They're brilliant," the other said, "but strict." I turned away quickly, hiding the burn of tears behind a clipboard. Strict. Brilliant. Not just anything. Not invisible. Not background. They were beginning to see it, even if they didn't know it was me. They had spent so long serving up fake respect to the world, curated images, empty praise, borrowed values. Now, without realizing it, they were working for the woman they once rolled their eyes at. The same hands that stirred their childhood soup were building the future they were now desperate to belong to. And I was just getting started. They never saw it coming. Not when I walked into the staff meeting in jeans and a simple blazer. Not when I stood at the front of the room with the week's performance metrics. They looked tired, but focused. My daughter scribbling notes, my son tapping his pen against the desk like he always did during tests. I cleared my throat. "Before we begin," I said, steady as stone, "I want to introduce myself properly." Their heads turned in unison. I watched my daughter blink twice, confusion giving way to something harder, recognition. My son's mouth parted slightly, like he'd forgotten how to breathe. I let it sit there, thick in the air. "I'm the founder of the Hearth," I said. "Every recipe, every post, every delivery box, mine. I'm also the woman who packed your school lunches for a decade. You used to call me the lunch lady." Silence. Not a sound in the room. The kind of silence that presses on your chest, makes your ears ring. I saw it all flash behind their eyes. Cafeteria trays, mumbled insults, the way they used to shrink in public when I wore my apron. They weren't kids anymore, but the shame turned them small again, shrinking in their chairs, trying to disappear. But I wasn't here to punish. I was here to be heard. "I built this while you were busy looking away," I continued. "While you chased strangers' approval, I was learning, creating, growing. Not for revenge, for myself. For every woman who's ever been overlooked because her hands smelled like onions and soap instead of perfume." My voice didn't shake. I'd rehearsed this moment. Not with words, but with work. With years of pouring myself into something they couldn't see. My daughter looked down, tracing the spiral of her notebook like it could hide her. My son finally found his voice, barely. "Why didn't you tell us?" he asked, soft, almost childlike. I looked at them both, not with anger, but with truth. "Because I wanted you to see the work before you saw the woman. I needed you to respect what I built without tying it to your shame." I wasn't cruel, but I wasn't soft either. Not anymore. They apologized, awkwardly, like people trying to clean a mess without knowing where to start. But I didn't reach for comfort. I let the discomfort stay. It was theirs to sit in, the same way I'd sat in silence after overhearing their laughter at the carnival. "It's not just about what you said," I told them. "It's about what you chose not to see. You looked past me. You assumed I was done growing because I stood behind a counter." That truth hit them harder than I expected. My daughter wiped her eyes without trying to hide it. My son nodded slowly, shame and pride mixing in a way that looked a lot like growth. "You were building all of this," he said, almost in awe. I didn't respond right away. I just watched them process it, watched them meet me again for the first time, not as their mother, but as the force behind their favorite brand. And then came the twist. "You're not heirs to this," I said. "Not yet." Their heads snapped up. "You're employees. You'll keep working like everyone else. If you want to earn something more, you will. Through consistency, through humility, through effort." It wasn't punishment. It was a gift. A second chance, offered not with open arms, but with open eyes. They didn't argue. Not because they were afraid, but because, for once, they understood. Something softened in them. Not all at once, but enough to notice. My daughter stayed behind after the meeting, quietly asking if she could take on more responsibility with customer outreach. My son asked to shadow the kitchen team, said he wanted to really understand the system. I didn't smile. Not yet. but I felt something shift, like respect, gently knocking at the door. That night, I sat in the same kitchen where I used to cry into dishwater, where I once swallowed shame like steam. But this time, I sat tall. I poured a glass of wine, lit a candle just for myself, and opened my notebook, not to plan, but to reflect. The kitchen hadn't changed, same tile, same chipped mugs. But I had. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was leading. I had turned the very space they overlooked into a kingdom. They used to call it just a kitchen, a place of messes, noise, routine. But this kitchen raised children, built a business, held my quiet dreams when no one else would. It was the heartbeat of everything I'd become. And now, the same children who once turned their backs on it were beginning to understand its power. Not because I told them, but because I made them walk its path. "This kitchen built your future," I whispered, resting my hand on the counter like it was sacred. "You just didn't want to see it." And now? Now they would, step by step, mistake by mistake, one honest shift at a time. They changed slowly, like bread rising on a cool day, steady and unhurried. It wasn't dramatic. No tearful speeches or sudden awakenings, just quiet moments where something clicked. My daughter started arriving early, asking questions she never used to care about. How to balance flavor with cost, how to train staff without losing heart. She watched me closely now, not with skepticism, but with the kind of respect you can't fake. My son, once so eager to escape anything that looked like home, now stayed after hours to scrub pans without being asked. I saw him laughing with the kitchen team, learning their names, their stories. One night he told me the mashed yuca reminded him of our Sunday dinners from when they were little. "I didn't know I missed it," he said, and I nodded. Because I had missed it too. Missed them, really. Missed us. We didn't talk much about the past. There was no need. It lingered in the air, understood but unspoken. Their actions became their apology. They began to carry the weight with me. Not just the work, but the values behind it. Humility, discipline, kindness without cameras. And I didn't need to preach. I let the food do the talking. Let the long days, the tired feet, the burn of earning something honest speak for themselves. The hearth was no longer just mine. It had become something bigger. A movement. A message. We started hiring single mothers, older women pushed out of jobs, young people who'd been told they had nothing to offer. And every time someone stepped into our kitchen, I told them the same thing. This place is built on love. Don't mistake that for weakness. And they never did. People started paying attention. First, it was a small article in a local magazine. The Hearth, where comfort meets courage. Then came the interviews, the podcasts, the award nominations. They all wanted to know the same thing. How did I go from lunch lady to founder of a national brand? And I'd tell them simply, I never stopped feeding people. I just changed the plate. That answer always made them pause. But it was the truth. I stood on stages I never imagined, in rooms with polished floors and polished people. But I never changed the way I spoke. I talked about soup, about stretch marks and exhaustion, about the sacred rhythm of caring for others when no one sees you. I talked about kitchens as classrooms and aprons as emblems of strength. And every time I saw someone in the audience wipe a tear, nod slowly. They understood. They'd lived it too. The business grew, but the mission never diluted. We didn't franchise. We mentored. We didn't sell out. We invited in. And in every store, behind every counter, there was a sign that read, "No one is just anything here." It became a kind of prayer, printed in both English and Spanish, hung beside the menu like scripture. My kids helped design it. They even argued over the font. That part made me smile. I didn't need revenge anymore. I didn't need to prove anything. What I had built and who I had become spoke louder than any insult ever could. I used to cry over being invisible. Now I honored the women who still felt that way. I carried them with me, in every recipe, every paycheck, every staff meeting. I fed the world with their strength, and I made sure the world knew their names. One afternoon, I stood outside our flagship store, a building I'd once only seen in daydreams. The sun hit the sign just right, making the gold lettering glow. Founded by a cook, built on love, run with fire. I traced the words with my eyes, feeling the weight of them settle in my chest. That store was more than a building. It was a testimony to resilience, to unseen labor, to women like me who had been overlooked for too long. My kids stood beside me, not as heirs, not yet, but as workers, as believers. My daughter held the door open for a customer, beaming. My son was inside, restocking shelves, laughing with one of our longtime prep cooks. They had grown, not into perfection, but into presence, and that meant more to me than any headline. They were finally rooted. Not above others, not apart from the work, but in it. Sometimes people still ask, "How did you do it?" I never know how to answer in one sentence, because the truth is messy. I did it while tired, while heartbroken, while washing the same dish 3 times because my mind was somewhere else. I did it while doubting myself, and then again the next morning, a little braver. I did it with cracked hands and a burning heart, and now it's theirs too, if they choose to carry it right. They called me just a lunch lady, said it with a smirk, like I should feel small. But now the world calls me boss, not because I shouted louder, but because I listened, I worked, and I stayed. And in the end, it was the kitchen they forgot, that built everything they needed.